it's hard to do anything
Anymore. With the prices of everything being going through the one buck, it is.
You know, well, you drink that hot, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Does your mouth not get hot?
No, I love it hot.
Well, I can't drink hot stuff like
Well, I mean, I can drink it hot, I can drink it cold. I am a coffee drinker.
that. It doesn't burn your mouth?
Not a bit, no.
Do you know if you ever burn your mouth?
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
You know how to stop that immediately?
How's that?
Put substitute sugar on it.
Really?
Take it away like that.
Well, I got plenty of that because I'm diabetic now, so I have to watch every little bit of sugar that goes in my mouth.
What kind of is there stages of that, diabetics?
Well, I'm not really sure, Dee, to tell the truth. I know that there's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 you're born with, but type 2 is something that comes on you later in life, and it really, you know, it comes from not taking good care of yourself, not eating right, that kind of stuff. But look, man, I like to bake, you know? I like to bake, I like to cook, I like to eat. And, you know, you got to die of something anyway, so why not live it up while you're here, you know?
Well, I don't know if all that stuff really makes a difference anyway. I never heard of. Is that diabetes? Is that diabetic? Is that the same thing?
Uh-huh.
I never heard of type 2 till, what, 10 years ago or 12?
You know, that did seem to be when it became popular,
all of a
didn't
sudden it was
All of a sudden
something.
everybody had
Yeah.
it. Yeah. But
Makes
I
you wonder
definitely was.
if it's really even a thing.
Well, I know when I read my sugar on my glucose meter, it sure makes it a thing. And I can feel it. I can tell it.
What does it feel like?
Well, if your sugar's really high, it'll make you feel hot, first of all, even in a cold room. Make your heart beat fast, you know, thumping like you just run a mile or something.
Because of sugar?
Yeah.
It's like drinking Coca-Cola?
Oh, yeah. I've not had a real Coca-Cola probably in 30 years.
What do you drink?
I drink the diet stuff, or like this, you know, I put 2 sugars in this coffee and I will feel it before the time I'm out the door.
Just feel nervous?
Well, like I say, it'll make you feel warm. You'll start sweating a little bit. Your heart will start to pound. And it can keep you awake at night. My sugar got a little high last night, and I wound up having some really crazy dreams. And
What if you just had regular, this is with, like if you ate a Little Debbie, send you into orbit?
No, I mean, a Little Debbie or a milkshake, you know, it's not a suicide attempt or anything, but I mean, it will drive it up. But I take 2 different kinds of insulin that brings it down. So.
Will exercise do away with it?
Absolutely. Well, it won't do away with it. It's like, you ever know Alex Romanuk? There's a doctor here in town. I went to him before he retired, and he told me, he said, you can control it and you can make it a lot less than what it is, but he said once that door's been opened, then you can't really ever slam it shut again. And that's kind of been the case when I was going to him, we had a gym in the incubator, and I got to where I was going every day. I mean, like it was religion, Dee. I was there every afternoon. I was there for at least an hour, and probably longer than that. I don't think my wife cared. She just told me to go on. But I got to the point where I was able to get off the insulin. But it was a matter of I had to watch every bite that went in my mouth. I had to show up at that gym every day. And a lot of times me and my trainer that was the tenant there at the incubator, we'd go over to the Greenway. And we might ride bikes for an hour and then come back and go into the gym. You know, so yeah, I mean, you can do a lot to help yourself.
Do you feel better when you're doing that rather than watching what you eat?
Absolutely.
Why don't we do it more?
That's a good question. I think because we're all busy people, you know it?
Don't have time, waiting on a phone call, waiting on a email reply.
Now, I don't know if maybe you're experiencing this same thing, but one of the things that I find most frustrating is having something that you need to get done and you're waiting on somebody else to provide part A or part B or part C to get it done. And that happens a lot these days. So
I don't know why it is, but it seems like I run across that type of person every day.
No,
All
absolutely,
day.
I do. I mean, it's just a occurrence that you come to take just as a cost of doing business because it happens so often.
When you're working for profit and you're working by the hour, you almost can't deal with people like that because they will put you out of business.
Yeah.
Now, if you're just working for the government, you could wait and get the email next week or.
And tell me, I had to tell a tenant that exact thing just the other day. We've got a handyman. He's kind of our head of physical plant. That he tries to go with every vendor that the college takes care of a lot of our maintenance and certainly things like the sprinkler inspections, fire extinguisher inspections, that kind of stuff. They have to go in these individuals' bay or office in some cases. And it's something that's been a thing because some of these businesses, we have all different kinds. And I can remember at one point we had 3 different massage therapists with 3 different businesses in the building. So some of them only had their one office and they would have to step outside and wait for somebody to get undressed and get under the sheet before that they'd go back in. Well, I mean, that was a constant threat. Was security going to walk in on somebody? Was maintenance going to walk in on somebody? Because a lot of them, you know, with turnover and stuff, there's always somebody that don't get the memo, right?
Always.
You know, so that would just take a pass key and go in. So we had to be real careful about that. And David Lloyd, he's the one that does that for us. He would try to go with all these individuals as they went in to do whatever it was that they had to do. And I had to tell one of our tenants the other day. She had mentioned to me that David was not with the person that was coming to perform some kind of maintenance function. And I just had to tell her, hey, you know, we can't pay David to stand around and wait to see if one of these vendors is actually going to show up, because this one vendor in particular was pretty bad to say they were going to be there or not. And you know that type.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, you can't do that. Not in today's market anyway.
I don't think that.
It's good coffee.
It is good. It's Starbucks, I think. I don't think that 30 years ago people were like that. And you know,
Certainly not
then
as
they had
much.
to return a phone call. Didn't even have fax.
Well, sure didn't have cell phones.
I mean, we had to stop at a payphone.
Or email, you know.
Didn't even have email.
Uh-huh.
Maybe people had to be more dependable then.
I guess maybe they did, but I can remember that my wife fired somebody from a payphone one time. See, my wife and I used to own a couple of radio stations, and that's actually how I met her. But yeah, we were waiting on an announcer to show up and take over the air because we were live then, you know, and we had an appointment with our attorney that we had to go to. So, and we wound up having to actually go off the air. Gwen's probably heard this story, but we had to shut the radio station down. We had to go off the air because it was illegal to leave a radio station running with nobody there, you know. And we get in the car and we're on the way down the road, and we hear this announcer on a competitor station. And my wife whipped that car into, I think it was Annabelle's at the time, found the first payphone she could and called and fired him. But that's the way you did things back then. There wasn't cell phones and Twitter and all this other mess, you know.
Well, even with the fax machine then, I remember having nightmares that I didn't have paper in the fax machine.
Yeah, I can
Because
see that.
somebody might fax it and it didn't come through.
My first experience with fax machines, I went to work for a company called Carlisle and Company, and their retail branch was a store called Jewel Box. You might remember those. They were around, I'm going back 30, 35 years, Dee, but they would use, and they actually used the whole word. They called it the facsimile machine.
Facsimile, yeah.
And they'd use it to run credit applications for customers.
Yeah.
Of course, that's about all we used it for back then. But that was my first introduction to a fax machine back then. And I can remember, I was all of what, maybe 19 years old, thinking what a marvel it was, and the time that we were living in, how much that.
And back then it was rolled paper. Remember that? It wasn't sheets of paper.
I remember, and that thing would spin round and round just like it was about to kick it out or something. But that's how those worked in those days.
But I remember then people, if they said they was going to call you tomorrow, they'd call you tomorrow.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a tomorrow. It was I'll call you tomorrow after lunch or before lunch.
Yep.
I wonder if they were as lax on doing what they say and following through as our group compared to their group.
Well,
does that make sense?
I know, I see what you're saying, and I think that way. But I'm sure our fathers and grandfathers probably thought the same thing about us, because they were even more strict about it than we've been.
And maybe they're...
It's entirely possible. I mean, I love, as much as anybody, to fuss about the younger generation, and it makes me wonder how in the world that... like the millennial generation, not trying to put a label on everybody,
right?
But certainly some of the ones that I've had experience with, makes me wonder if these kids are going to be running the country one of these days, and some of them already are, and it makes you wonder, how do they do that when you can't get them to do anything but, sit on the phone like this? I don't know. Maybe the days of doing business face to face with somebody is going out of style. But
I can't. And I do some of these Zoom meetings and stuff, and they're okay on occasion. But I really need to be sitting there talking with you and kind of seeing the way your head tilts and stuff like that before I can.
Well, you can read a lot about somebody being
their
in front of
posture,
them.
everything versus just sitting on a Zoom thing.
Now, I'll say I'm a Zoom fan. I think the timing of having that kind of technology, considering everything that happened, was great. And I mean, a technological wonder for business, sort of like the fax machine was.
Yeah. Because
I mean, it can eliminate the expense of having to send somebody
from
traveling.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to Nashville or to Florida anymore to speak with people from the National Incubation Association and whatnot. So, I mean, it's a great tool, but just like any other tool, you don't use it for everything. I still believe there's value in the face-to-face meeting. And as a matter of fact, our board of directors is going to have our first face-to-face meeting next month in October.
I wonder if we didn't have Zoom, if we'd even been able to have a pandemic.
Well, it does make you wonder, don't it? But, I've got some family members that passed away of it, so kind of made a believer out of me, I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, it's happened before, it's going to happen again. It's all in how you treat it. And I don't mean treat it in a medical sense, but it's all how that you look about how you handle it, just like any other problem in your life. You can let it blow up into being something all-consuming, or you can use a little common sense and just get on with it. That's my opinion. Everybody's got one, but that's the way I look at it. But it was great that we had the technology at the time. I can tell you, and this is really not my story to tell, but my wife works from home now. And she works for the state of Tennessee. She's a regional supervisor for vocational rehab. And they were already in the process of pushing everybody home. This was a process that they had already started that was projected to last a couple of years. And what they had planned for to happen over 2 years, the state employees managed to make happen in a couple of days, which I give them credit for that, because
they were already moving that way.
They were moving that way, and by cracky, how slow government works.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they managed to make that happen in a couple of days, which I credit to the little guys that work for the state of Tennessee. They made it happen.
It takes so long to get anything done now.
It really does. I mean, there's so much red tape to have to go through to get anything done.
You know, I wait 2 weeks on a building permit nowadays,
Really.
and they like me.
Well,
That's
I
it.
think
It's just the process, and they're waiting on departments. I'm sure.
yeah. I mean, there's always some kind of hoop that you got to jump through to make stuff happen. I mean, we had to go through the State Building Commission, Tennessee Board of Regents, the State Fire Marshal's Office. I mean, the list of people you've got to please to do anything on a college campus is ridiculous. And we've got it easy because we're technically not part of the college. We actually lease that space from them.
How does that work exactly?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with our building or not. You've been over there, I know.
Yeah, it's over there where the shooting range was, right?
Well, that's one of them. The main building was the one that you came into when we had that pre-planning meeting.
On the far left.
On the far side, we kind of book in the campus.
Yeah.
And it was the old vocational building. It's where they used to do the car body work and welding and that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, there was plenty of days where the bus would roll up in front of that building because that building wasn't built by the college. It was built by the city schools. And that was supposed to be a vocational training for city schools. And
on Cleveland State
on
property?
Cleveland State property, yeah. Well, state property, put it that way. But, I mean, Don Guerin, you remember Don. He used to tell me he could sit from his office and look out the window and see the bus pull up and maybe 2 or 3 kids get out. You know, till finally the building just become derelict. It was sitting there empty with nothing going on in it. But for every square foot of space you have on the Cleveland State campus, or at least this is what I was told at the time, you can have so many square feet per head of student. And so when Don proposed putting an incubator there and renting that space from the college, which they let us do for $1 a year, they're great hosts, they worked fabulous with us, but it took 33,000 square feet off their books. And I'm told that that's what allowed the Athens and Von Orr campuses to happen, is because that square foot was took off, so they had more square feet they could use elsewhere. So, I mean, it was a win-win-win for everybody, you know? And we remodeled the building.
Now, when you say we, who's the entity?
Well, the entity itself is the incubator board. Your brother's the president of it.
Is that right?
Yeah, he is the president, Dee Burris, and he's absolutely been fabulous. As a matter of fact, he's probably going to get conned into doing it a little longer because that's what happens when you do a good job. People want you to keep at it. So,
So
the
who
board
started the
itself-
incubator board? Or
Well,
who started?
Don Guerin was really the champion. He was the one that brought the idea. And see, this all came out of the Small Business Committee at the Chamber of Commerce. I know you remember Bernadette Douglas. She was on that committee. As a matter of fact, she just retired from our board. But Mel Bedwell was in that group. And Don had been to some kind of seminar where that business incubators was being discussed. I mean, back in these days, this was a new thing, you know? And he brought that idea back to that Small Business Committee. And they started making revolutions toward setting one up in Cleveland. They thought it was a good idea. And they had a feasibility study done. Now, the guy that did the feasibility study at the time came back to Don after it was finished, and he said, these are the highest numbers I've ever seen for business incubation in an area. And I dare say the good old boy got proved right, because Don championed the progress, and we wound up with a grant from TVA, a grant from Southeast Tennessee Development District, Board of Education. I mean, just a lot of people put a nickel here and a nickel there in it. Probably TVA and SEDTT was the biggest ones. But, you know, we remodeled the building, put it into little office spaces and bay spaces that an individual could afford, you know. And our business plan, starting out, was to be 65% occupied by the end of the first operational year, 85% occupied by the end of the second, okay? We opened August of 2000. By February of '01, we were at 100% occupancy, and we've stayed that way ever since. We've been building, we had built such a waiting list by 2003 that in 2003, Don suggested to the board of directors, we got to expand. We got to have more space. And we took some larger spaces and chopped them up into smaller spaces so we could offer more opportunity. In 2008, we took part of a large bay after the tenant left. That was the bay where the college was talking about putting the daycare. And because of regulation and the very things we were talking about, never wound up happening. So they told us that that idea hadn't fell by the wayside, but we were going to get to keep that bay. So we cut it down to one bay and took the rest of the space. This was over 3,000 square feet. We took made a 1,000 square foot bay and then took the rest of it and made 8 new offices. Dee, so help me, the day that we cut the ribbon on those offices, they were all full. You know, and we still had people on the waiting list. So, I mean, it's just been, to call it a good idea.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem.
Was this
Doesn't
new,
even get it
or
started.
does other towns have incubators?
Other towns do now. Chattanooga's got a very nice one. As a matter of fact, there was a time when the one in Chattanooga was the largest one in the country.
But it's born out of Chamber of Commerce. They sort of.
It doesn't. It can be born out of a lot of places. I mean, it could be a private group. It could be a Chamber of Commerce. It could be a college.
But the one here is.
But the one here is standalone. We have our own corporation, our own board of directors. We're just a nonprofit company like any other.
Trying to help
in this
out.
county, trying to help out. And knock wood, I think we've done a really good job of running it like a business. I mean, I can hold the incubator up as an example to any of the tenants that come in because we live within our means. You know, and we run the place responsibly.
You never hear of y'all asking for money, really.
We don't. We don't get money from the state. We don't get money from the city or county. We don't get money from the Fed. You know, the most I can say is, as far as having an ongoing benefactor, is Cleveland State, because they continue to let us rent the space for $1 a year. And to a certain degree, that does help them too, because we're paying for a lot of the maintenance on the building. And power bills, ongoing expenses, stuff like that. We pay for all that. So that takes that expense off their back, which I don't know if you know, but we've got a new president at Cleveland State right now. Have you met her yet?
No, I heard somebody was new. They say she's really good.
Oh man, she is wonderful. I'm feeling very confident about Cleveland State's future under her leadership. Dr. Ty Stone, she's great. Yeah, if you haven't met her, you need to.
Dr. Ty Stone.
Dr.
What's
Ty
she a doctor
Stone.
of?
I'm
Or is that some
presuming
kind of
education.
Education.
Yeah. But I know she is retired Air Force. She was an air traffic controller for the Air Force. She probably had that place sorted out before close of business the first day. But I think she's going to be really good. I'm excited about the future in front of us with her there.
Who's your atypical, what do you call them, tenants?
I tend to call them clients, but they are tenants. I mean, residents, you know, for like a better way to put it.
Residents may be the.
Yeah.
So give me your atypical resident.
An atypical or a typical one? Because we've got some atypical ones.
Typical.
Well, I'll tell you a little story, kind of on myself. But when we first started, you know, Don was there and Don was out, and he was about ready to retire. So, you know, he didn't hang out at the office very much. He told me what I needed to do, and then he'd go to the house, you know. But he came in one day, and I was sitting there with a gentleman who was, I won't mention any names, but he was a retired engineer, And I don't know, but engineers to me, I've yet to meet one that didn't make you, they're all about half bubble off center,
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
opinion, anyway.
Yeah, not very exciting either.
But I tell you, this guy he was kind of eccentric, but he had an idea for making golf putters out of banjo strings. And things make you go,
Yeah.
I turned him down. I was about to send him away, and Don come in. He said, no, we're not turning him away. If he's got the gumption to start this business and he thinks it can make it work, we're letting him in. And that's kind of been our mantra ever since.
As long as it's legal, you can try it.
As long as it's legal, you can try it, exactly. And he come up with that thing. And I know you remember Carl Hyatt, too.
Yeah.
Carl loved that thing. I mean, anytime he had any big wigs that he wanted to impress, the chancellor or whomever, God love him, he would bring them to the incubator. And the golf guy's office was right across from mine, so I could hear him with the little putter in there, twang, every time he'd hit the ball. And I mean, people loved it, but I would have never have thought that anything like that would have ever gotten traction. But I mean, it's probably the most famous, if not infamous, thing to ever come out of the incubator.
What does it cost them to be there?
Well, it
At the
depends on the
incubator.
size. Now, if it's office space, I've got offices that, really nothing this size, but if, say, 125 square feet, which yourself, that's about the size of a good walk-in closet.
Yeah.
Maybe not even a good
10
walk-in
by
closet.
12 or something.
But I can let those out for $125 a month, and that includes phone, internet, power. They have no other bill but their lease payment. And I don't know if you follow this kind of stuff, but SBA and NBIA, my group, the studies are showing that the amount of space needed for a business is shrinking. And it's all electronics. I mean, because of technology, the amount of space you need physically is shrinking down. And now they're saying that it's going to be around 100 square feet. And I've seen that trend. I've watched, because the call for the larger spaces is really starting to wane. Everybody just needs a place to put a desk, a laptop, and hang their hat, and they're ready to go.
How long have you been involved in this?
Since the very beginning. I was there before the phones were
Like
even
what,
installed.
2000 or
2000, yeah.
Have you seen a difference? Have you really seen a difference in the trend of what people want to start?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And a lot of the businesses that we're getting calls about now are not even businesses that we could house in the incubator. A lot of it went through a phase there of being a lot of it online. And now that's moving away from online and back into the physical world.
Service industries?
People that maybe detail cars or something like that. So I turned one of those away because, of course, we have nowhere to have anything like that. But it does shift. And I'll tell you something else where it shifts is maybe for a year or so, year and a half, everybody wants office space. And then it'll switch and everybody wants base space. I might have an office sitting here empty, ready to go, but they want a bay. And I've even seen business owners rent one of those offices so that they'll have first lick at a bay when it come open. Once you're in the incubator, residents get first lick at anything that comes open. So because they got to be able to grow. If we're going to stifle them, then we might as well put them out. But we give them first lick. So I've seen people that have rented an office and not even moved into it, just rented the space. And a lot of times they'll let me sublet it while that they're waiting on one to come open. Jessica Carasquillo is on our board of directors right
Where
now.
have I heard that name?
She is the Social Security advocate. You probably saw her on the billboards and all over. She was there at that point in time when when she first come to me. I didn't have a thing to offer her. And Rick Platts, he was the director of the Small Business Development Center at the time. And he brought her to me and he said, Hurley, this lady's got a really great idea. I said, is there anything you can do for her? And I thought, well, I don't know. This was the week between Christmas and New Year's that she came to see me. And I didn't have a thing, but I knew that this one guy that I had upstairs, he had rented an office mainly so he could use our conference room because he was teaching people. Now, this is how long ago this was. He was teaching people how to use eBay. And people were paying to come learn how to use eBay from him. So he had that office till March. So I told her, I said, I can get you a sublet in here until March. But after that, if nothing comes available, you're going to have to move out. And she agreed to that. But she's a very faith-driven person, and she took it on faith that a way would be made, so in she come. And Rick had told her that she could expect to have maybe 3 new customers a month. Within 6 months, that woman had over 100 active cases,
Golly.
and she was already hiring. Which, that's
Yeah.
the goal, right? We want to see our tenants making a living, but we want them hiring people too.
Yeah.
And I mean, she just absolutely went gangbusters. We wound up helping her open a satellite office in Orlando, which is where she was from. And then before she sold it, I swear I think she was national before she sold it, because she started taking advantage of the electronics and being able to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, when she come in to see me, she was freshly divorced, had 2 small children. I got to watch her kids grow up. I still stay in touch with them. But yeah, she had, she started her business, she had a brand new credit card, $1,500 limit on it, Dee. And she whipped that out. She was so proud of that card. Still had the sticker on it,
Yeah.
This is what I'm starting my new business with. And I'm like, okay, gotcha, And I figured at the time that was another one that I would have probably turned away if I didn't have Don in the back of my head saying, you let her do it, And she became a success, one of the most successful. We've had more than just a few people get rich over there, although that's not a lot of their goals. A lot of them are just guys like you and me that are trying to make a living, make a little better life for their family. Not all of them have the intention of going over there and I'm going to strike it rich and I'm going to be the next Bill Gates and yada,
They
yada,
just
yada.
want a place to have a small business and not have to have people come to their house and meet them or something.
Exactly.
Is all it is.
If you are running a business out of your home, then I don't care how old that business is, you qualify to be in the incubator. Now, if you've rented a space out in public and you see that, just getting started, because a lot of them are bootstrapping, that they can't come up with and let's face it, some of the rents in this town are astronomical, They see pretty quick that they're not going to be able to do that. So then they can come back to us as long as they're not more than a year old. After a year old, then...
So you can't come in there, go out on your own, run up a bunch of debt, and run back.
No.
That's
No. And as a matter of fact, everybody is paying in advance. So us being a charity, we don't browbeat over the rent, but you start getting behind, it's hard to get caught up. So what I try to do is not only go in and see, hey, we got to have some rent, but how can I help you get that customer base up to where you can pay the rent? So I'm coming at it from both sides. See, my first job was a banker too. I was with Wachovia back in the day, which I guess it doesn't matter to say their names since they're kind of gone now. But
was that in Dalton or where?
No, this was in North Carolina. My mom had a position kind of similar to Bo's. She was senior vice president with Wachovia. And I was the guy that would go and repossess the cars. So,
About what year was that?
Oh gosh, we're going back to mid-'80s. I'm thinking 84, 85 maybe. Because they used to fly me all over the place to pick up a car or
drive it back.
Drive it
Did you ever
back.
get into any tussles?
Oh, dude, I had a preacher one time absolutely cussed me for everything I was worth. I had the key to the church van. I repossessed the church van, but I had the key to it already. So I just went out there to get it. He'd already been notified. And anytime I'd go into a town, I'd always notify local law enforcement, or the bank would have notified them before I even got there. So I'd just go collect the vehicle. Well, I went out and I fired that church van up. And here I go down the road. That little preacher come out of that house, absolutely raising hell at me, calling me every name in the book and picking up rocks and throwing. But I mean, that was just one of the things you had to kind of expect.
Why they notify the law enforcement? Because you're not stealing. I guess?
Yeah, because I mean, he could have very easily called the law and, hey, somebody just stole the church van, and then you can imagine
Now,
what that would have looked like.
If you're running a small operation, you probably wouldn't call the police and say you're coming. You just go get the car, right?
Oh yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, if the only time that you'd give them any warning would be if it was a situation where that they were okay with you coming to get it, because a lot of times for some of those people it was the better choice to give me back the car. You know, they're like, here, God, you take it and the payment with you. And, you know, so. But
are you originally from North Carolina?
Yeah. You ever hear of Drexel Heritage Furniture?
I think I've heard of Drexel Furniture, but not
well,
Drexel Heritage.
Well, Drexel Heritage was the name of one of the companies there. They all of them: Henry Don, Broyhill, Drexel Heritage.
That's where people go to get the Big Ben furniture and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that little town Drexel is where I'm from. That's where I was.
Where is it
raised.
next to?
It is the county seat's Morganton, which it's Burt County.
Morganton.
But all that stuff.
Isn't there a Morganton, Georgia too?
Yeah, and a Morgantown, I know Virginia, but there may be a Morganton, Virginia too, if I'm not mistaken.
How long does it take you to get from here to Morganton?
Depends on how much you obey the speed limit, but you know.
2 hours.
I can get you there in 5 hours. My wife can get you there in 3.5.
So it's a long ways off.
Yeah, it's a good little trip. It's a good little trip, but Harlan Rice, Gwen knows Harlan, plays with Harlan.
Yeah.
He that is my wife's brother, and he often told us about how great a place that Cleveland was to live, and we would come down here and stay with him and visit and carry on, and you could see there was. I tell people this a lot of times. Western North Carolina is a beautiful place, lots of scenery, lots to do and whatnot, but I like the people here. I wouldn't move back.
Cause you're way that's 5.5 hours away from north. That's nearly into South Carolina, I guess, right?
Well, nah, it's a little more north than that. I mean, I still call it the mountains. These old mountains are my home.
Well, Tennessee and North Carolina were one state at one time, right?
Yeah. Well, we used to say North Carolina. We just give Tennessee the part we didn't want. But yeah, I guess it would have been called the Piedmont. Was where the Drexel was.
Oh. How did Harlan and your sister?
No, my wife.
Your wife
is Harlan's sister.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how did y'all meet?
Well, see, she still lived in North Carolina. That's where Harlan's from.
Oh, Harlan's from.
Yeah, Harlan's from Madison County.
What brought Harlan here?
Well, he met a girl. Tale as old as time. You meet the right woman, you follow her around. So, but yeah, as far as I know,
Harlan's
that's
been
what
around here as long as I've.
Since God was a boy.
Yeah.
Well, now him and Tammy married pretty young, I do believe, and Tammy was from here, his wife, and so.
He's been around here as long as I
know he raised his kids here. He's been here longer than I have.
Wasn't he a DJ or something at one time?
He started out, sure. As a matter of fact, he started out at the first radio station me and Karen had, because it was the only radio station in the county.
What was the name of it?
WHB. Well, at the time it was WMMH. We changed the call letters later. Mm-hmm. But I believe Weaverville, Marshall, Mars Hill is what that stood for.
And that was in Cleveland?
No. This was back in Madison County, in North Carolina. But that's I know Harlan worked there before my wife did. But Harlan came here, like I say, at a pretty young age.
Well, it's a small world, isn't it? They say
Tell me about it.
They say you're what's that saying? 6 degrees from me.
6 degrees of separation between you and everybody else in the world. I believe that.
I believe it. You believe the population is reducing?
Not really, no. But I know that we didn't hit that magical number of 50,000 on the census this time. which is a good thing for us.
I think that worldwide the population is starting to decrease.
Is it?
I think so.
Well, I don't guess that surprises very much, but
I mean, people don't have kids like they did.
no, they don't. Well, they can't afford to. You know, Karen, my wife, come from a family of 8, and Harlan and Karen were the youngest. But people can't afford to have 8 kids anymore. I know I couldn't. 2
I can't
was
afford
all,
the 2 I got.
I was going to say 2 was a plenty for me. And shoot, they're still a drain. So I shouldn't say that. My kids are great, but I mean that's just the long and short of it. Families are smaller because money's tight.
Do you think you have a understanding of small business operators and getting started?
I like to think I do. I mean, every time that you think you know it all, then you find out real quick that you don't. I learn something new every day. I would not go as far as to call myself an expert, but people that have a book knowledge of business, and I think you'll agree with me here, a book knowledge of business is great. You know, Rick Platts was like that. He could rattle off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 exactly the steps that a business is supposed to follow.
Yeah.
But you and I both know, having done it,
You can throw that book away.
you can throw the book away. The business never read the book. You got to go to step 2, jump to 4, come back, pick up 3, and move on to 6. And unless you've actually been there and done it, there's no way you can know that. You know?
I wonder if business is harder now than it used to be.
I think it is.
With taxes and...
I absolutely think it is. Well, the regulation that's put on small business now, the tax burden, and not only that, but I mean, you know, old guys like me have to learn all this new technology to keep abreast. And I tell you, that's a place where that it's becoming a problem with incubated businesses. Maybe in general, maybe just me, I don't know. But I know with the National Incubation Association when they put out a report that told that young people 30 and under, right now are opening businesses the least that they ever have. As long as they've been keeping records, that age group is at its lowest point ever. The people that are opening businesses now are people 55 and up.
Retired from the other job.
They're doing their second act. You know?
Always wanted to sell T-shirts or something.
Well, there you
whatever
go.
it is.
My idea was to have a hot dog stand on the beach.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah.
But it's people in our age group that are opening new businesses, and of course, you know, you'd have to bring in a kid off the street to tell you how to use the Twitter and the Snapchat and the, you know, from what I understand, Facebook's now kind of passe. You know, the kids, and the younger people.
Yeah, I understand. They don't really use that anymore.
They don't use that anymore.
Wonder what
for
they
guys
use.
like me. But well, that's just the point. You know, if you're a 55 plus business owner and you've got a product that you need to reach that market, you just about have to reach out to somebody in that age group.
Especially if you don't have a storefront.
Exactly.
And you can't afford a storefront.
Well, and storefronts are kind of going by the wayside too, because so much retail is moving online. And so, you know, what's a guy supposed to do? You know, you reach out and I've had some of the business professors next door say, go find you a kid to do this for you. You know, and cheap labor and good know-how, so why not?
I read this book one time. It was from, and I probably got this wrong, but I'll give you the basic premise of it. It was Germans, Why We're Rich was the name of the documentary, and it was talking about how they were going back into their homes and creating their own business. It was sort of a pre-runner to what we're talking about now. Is the reason it was so, I remember it so well. They were having employees, 1 or 2, it were down to like 5 employees or 3, and the lunchroom was the kitchen, and they would have a small manufacturing plant, and they would ship everything. It was all about shipping, whatever it was you were doing.
Yeah.
So you take out the building, like the fire marshal and all these regulations on having a building. Because what you do for these people that are coming into the incubator, all you're doing is taking out the brick and mortar responsibility from them.
Yeah.
And you're just charging them a...
Well, and some of the technology expense too. We've got a phone system in there that
Yeah, if
we've
you
got
just...
$40,000 in. You know, there's no small business going to be able to afford something like that.
No, they
starting
just
out.
have a cell phone with call waiting at best.
Exactly. And, you know, probably when this phone system wears out,
Yeah.
we'll probably go out of the phone business because cellular phones have become, at the time that we put in our last system, cell phones were still at a place where that if you called a business and you could tell it was to a cell phone number, that was fly by night. I mean, you didn't want to do business.
Yeah, you was a little leery.
You was a little leery about that. You wanted somebody with a landline in an established business. But that stigma seems to be going away.
I get to where when I get ready to call somebody, if it's a 4-7 number, I don't even call because that's their business, and I try to call their cell.
Yeah.
So it's slipped, hasn't it?
It really has. And see, that's one of the things you were talking about earlier, where stuff has come full circle. And of course, the cell phone companies, I can say because my son works for T-Mobile, that you know they are doing their best to become the go-to for small business. Well, small or big business, you know, and they're having plenty of success at it too.
I don't know what the next thing is on all that. Do you?
Oh God, it hurts my brain to even think about where it's going to go.
How
from
often
here.
does UPS come to the incubator?
Hey, that's one of my.
I bet they're.
I was going to say that's one of the little measures that I use.
Yeah.
To see what the economy's doing right now. Now you can look at the news and you can, you know, listen to whoever you want to as far as economic numbers and whatnot. But when I've got FedEx and UPS coming into the building every day and sometimes twice a day, I know things are good. When did I see days go by that neither one of them has shown up? That's when you look out. And normally, you know, we're in a enviable position of being, if you know, if we have a little, you remember how that the economy kind of dipped after 9/11, okay? That's what I call a little dip. I mean, to a lot of people it was serious, but you know, to me it was kind of a bump in the road. We'll get business off that. You know, some of the people that unfortunately were laid off from a job or a business, that's the time they think, well, you know, now's the time for me to start that business that I wanted to start. And so we'll see an uptick in calls coming in of people interested in space and wanting to get something on the road during times like that. Now, back in 08 and 09, everybody was hurting so bad that it even hurt us because we lost a few businesses during that and didn't have a phone ringing at the time because stuff was just so bad. But we clearly very quickly bounced back. So.
Did y'all have to make adjustments during then?
Not really. Our bad debt and slow pay is ridiculously small.
Do you have to do a regular eviction like you would for an apartment, or do you just talk to them?
I don't normally
Say,
have
man,
to.
you got to leave. You're not going to make it. You're
The one
never
or
here.
two, the one or two that I've had to do that with have fortunately respected me enough that I just went and said, hey, you know, we've carried you as long as we can. I'm going to make up a repayment plan that you can afford, but we need the space back. And normally that's where it ends. I've never had to formally evict anybody, you know.
It's not like you're throwing them out of their house.
No, it's not. And
they're
most
not got
of
the
them,
business anyway, probably at that point.
At that point, they don't. And I mean, they're usually very reasonable about it. They can see the writing on the wall as good as I can, because we hang on to them as long as we possibly can to give them that opportunity to turn something around. And I've always been and here again, something that I've learned from Don Guerin. I learned a lot from that old man. He, you know, when somebody would get behind, it was so hard for them to get caught up, even though they may have turned their business around. He would make a repayment plan that they could pay in addition to their rent. Like pay their rent and $50 a month extra until they got caught up.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to be there to help small business, not be a pain in the ass. And so that's why we try to help them stay just as long as they can. We want to give them the benefit of every minute that they can have in that incubator before they have to go out and face the cruel world.
You mentioned a minute ago National Association of Incubators. Is
Yeah.
that a thing?
Yeah, it's international now. It's the International Business Incubation Association. And not every incubator is part of it, but a lot of them are. I'm a NBIA certified director.
Seems like that would be a big benefit to see what they're doing around the world and other places.
First of all, us incubator directors, we're a small group. And there's precious few of us left that actually remember how to build one. So, yeah, it's a big boon to see how somebody else in some other place is doing it.
Is there a lot of members?
Yeah, there is.
Like thousands?
Well, I mean, you got to think there's only a few thousand incubators in the world, so the directors that go to it, the members are probably in the, well, there may be over 1,000, I would suppose.
That's quite a few.
It's quite a bit, yeah, and like I say, it's international. But, I mean, I had a mentor. His name is Mark Long. God love him. He's another gentleman that I learned a great deal from. He was president of NBIA, and he was giving classes down there at the time that I was studying to be a certified director. And we just hit up a friendship, and there was so many little things, little nuanced things that he taught me that really made my job a lot easier. And he brought back stuff that I brought to the board and said, hey, my buddy down in Florida tells me that this is a possibility. We need to go ahead and be proactive and get ahead of it. Because we had, all right, for example, we had nothing in writing for what would happen if a tenant died while in office.
Yeah.
And Mark had told me this horror story about a tenant that he had that passed away, that he wound up having to eat a year's worth of rent while that person's will was in probate. And see, it's just those little things like that something silly that he told me once. He said, when you go to buy chairs like these for your conference room, make sure they're purple or bright orange, or make sure they're just ugly as sin. And I'm like, why? That way, if you see one out in the rest of the building, you know it's yours,
And who would steal a purple chair?
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd be surprised. But we had Carl Hyatt, God love him, he was one of our biggest cheerleaders. I thought the world of him. And he donated to us a conference room table and a bunch of bright blue, electric blue chairs, which, they were cougar blue.
Yeah,
They were Cleveland State's color. But, I mean, they were hideously ugly, anywhere but his conference room. They really weren't appropriate,
Yeah.
But we use those things we still got some of them. We used them for years. But you'd be surprised how many people would come in and roll one of them ugly things down to their office and use it until the day could do better.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. Hello, I'm Dee Burris, and most of you know me as a general contractor. In October of 2020, I started a podcast that I call The Discussion with Dee Burris. Each week, I have conversations with interesting, informative, and fascinating people from Cleveland and Bradley County and the surrounding areas. You can watch the discussion at dburris.com on YouTube and Facebook, where we would ask you to please subscribe, it's free, for updates and notifications of new shows. It's no problem.
How long can a person stay at the incubator?
Up to 4 years.
sets that limit? Just y'all do, or is that a?
That was set before I come.
Wonder
so
wonder how that
I would
originated.
imagine that original board probably set that rule.
Because there's got to be a point where it's no longer an incubator. Was Randy
Yeah.
Miller over there? Remember Randy Miller?
Yeah, I remember the glass
seems-
guy.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah,
like I
he was
used to
there.
go over there and meet him, and I think one time he said, "I've got to go. I've got to get a location." But in fact, I built his building.
Over
And-
on Bible Street?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, cool.
And,
He moved out of the incubator into
Yeah,
that.
and he had to get out because his time had run out.
Yeah, yeah. it
But
had.
now there's a
But
success
he was
story.
a great, no, yeah, it was a great story. And his dad, Harry, wasn't it?
Oh, I knew
Wasn't
Harry
it?
well.
Yeah, I mean, they worked together over there, and they were.
His
yeah,
daddy
they-
was a great guy.
They had a bay that the law enforcement now uses for the law enforcement academy.
Harry
But-
Miller.
Yeah, Harry Miller. But I still use them.
Oh, I
mean,
do too. I used
yeah.
him last week.
Well, see, when we had one of the best things about the incubator, I think, is it's more like a big apartment house than it is a business complex.
Yeah.
These guys all do business with each other. Sometimes it's barter, sometimes it's straight up. I had one business in there, and you probably remember him, Jay Thomas.
Jay Thomas. He
Had
was
Kiosk Creations.
Kiosk Creations. Yep.
See, he was in there, and he had several bays. But I mean, he was using our awning company. He was going to Randy Miller for his glass. He was using Rex Wallace as his CPA. I mean,
Oh, he had a lot of resources.
oh yeah, I mean, right there in the
Yeah.
building, it was a one-stop shop for him. All he had to do was walk down the hall and see just about anybody he needed, and a lot of it worked that way. Real. Well, they call it symbiotic, you know. There was
There's a
real
word. There's a
relationship
word for it.
But the networking,
Symbiotic,
was-
maybe, like-
yeah, the networking is just fabulous.
Do you have
and that group looks out for each other too. Let me tell you. Now we can talk about each other. Well, we're all like an old married couple. Don't let somebody from outside talk about us, because that's when it's on. You know,
do they have a snack room in there? Seems like.
we were going to, and when the college took back the space where the law enforcement academy is
Yeah.
now, that's where that was going to be. So right now we just kind of use my outer office. I've got a microwave and some kitchen appliances out
Is there
there.
a vending machine there?
Yeah, we've got a vending machine company. It's supposed to be healthy things, but we had to modify ours a little bit. So,
That reminds me of that show King of Queens. Remember when he was wanting to be in charge of something, so they let him be in charge of the vending machine, and he told him to take all the health food out.
I remember that. I remember that. But you know, his company, it specializes in vending machines with healthy products in it, like you know, those protein drinks that a lot of
Yeah.
guys will drink
Yeah.
when they're working out.
Yeah.
And shoot, I'm guilty of that myself. When I was working out down at our gym, he had one of the vending machines in the gym, and it had all different kinds of protein drinks and powders and snacks and whatnot.
Is it a
in there.
regular vending machine with the
regular-
coins like you,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
is it just credit
Well,
cards? Or I don't know
no,
how-
you can use dollar bills, you can use coins, you can use your credit card. I mean, he's an all-purpose offender there, and so
He doesn't make them there. He just
no,
sells them, or
just sells them.
like a distributor of some sort.
Yeah, yeah. What he uses our place for, the office that he has with us, is where his business office is and where he does storage of some of his product. But the machines are all over the place. He just happens to have one there in our building. We ask him to.
So he services.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now I think he's got a full-time gig too, but that describes a lot of our people. You know, healthcare being what is expensive as it is, a lot of our people, to keep their health insurance and benefits, will do a full-time gig during the day and then come to the incubator and do that at night. It's not uncommon. I mean, we could probably go over there at 2 or 3 in the morning and there'd be somebody there working, you know. That's not unusual at all. As a matter of fact, when we first started out, we used to close the gate at 9 p.m. and we'd reopen it at 6. We found out real quick, like within 6 months of being open, that wasn't going to fly.
Because these are people that's trying to make it, and they're needing special times and arrangements.
Yeah. Or I think anybody can be successful, Dee. I really do. I believe that in my heart, if they're willing to sacrifice what you have to sacrifice in order to do that. A good example of that, we've got a guy over there, he's one of our anchor tenants. His name's Jeff Cox, and he has Corporate Networking Solutions. And I know his car was always the first one in the parking lot in the morning, the last one that you'd see as you pulled out at night because he was still going to be there. That man absolutely worked himself to death, but he's very successful now.
I've heard that guy. That's supposed to be a guy I'm supposed to call to help me with this thing here. That
He can do it.
I thought it was Computer Network Solution, or is it
Corporate
Network
Yeah,
Solutions.
Corporate Network Solutions. But he's also got the Mac PC Market over here at Cook's Plaza. That's where they sell their. That's where they do their retail sales.
Do they fix cell phones too?
You know, they used to, but I think they quit.
I know. So you can't allow you can't have.
I can't have retail.
Yeah, it'd be a plaza then.
Well, see, that's where that I feel like that we need to expand to. There's two things that I think we're missing: retail and kitchen incubation. Now, you probably know Jenny DeCook with the Tennessee Small Business Development Center.
Yeah.
God, she is. They're lucky to have her.
But kitchen stuff gets complicated.
It gets complicated and it gets expensive real quick.
If you're cooking, it's a problem.
That's the truth. But we turn away. She turns away and I turn away. A minimum of one a week that's looking for that kind of guidance or space. Mm-hmm. Now, at the incubator, we've had a bakery. Well, we had two bakeries. We had one at our main building and one at the other building. Oh man, that was another one that Carl Hyatt, God love him. I've brought him up several times. He must be thinking about him. But whenever he'd come down there, that man never left without coming out with a shopping bag full of bread out of that bakery.
So there was a bakery in there?
It was at the time, yeah. It was the only bakery we had in the building that would lend itself to doing baking.
She had, because of exhaust vents and stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a candy cane vent in this one bay that we had. I don't know what they had done in there previously, but it was a derelict vent that was just left over. Mm-hmm. And he was able to vent his ovens out through that. Otherwise, he'd have been poking a hole in my roof, and I wasn't going to let that happen.
Fire marshal would have wanted something.
Oh, you know that they would. But, I mean, the way that our roof leaks and as expensive as it is to fix that, no.
Well, who's there now?
Well, that's where the law enforcement is now.
Oh, so now they
so I don't have that space anymore. That went back to the college. But if
she had a bakery, she'd almost have a captive audience there, wouldn't she? Mm-hmm. At least
really would.
Maybe not a lot of money, but some.
Well, do you remember G Daddy's Barbecue?
Didn't he move out on Tasso Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had him on here.
Okay.
I really like him.
All right. Well.
Know what G Daddy is? It's something else, isn't it?
It's G Daddy's Barbecue.
Is it G Daddy's? Do you remember Gwen? I want to call Vibes.
No, that wasn't. That
he
wasn't
might have changed.
mine.
A different guy.
Must have been a different guy.
Different guy.
But
I'm gonna get hungry.
This fella and his wife did chicken on a stick. Oh my God, that stuff was good. It was smoked chicken wrapped in apple smoked bacon that they'd oh man, I mean, you talk about. And you could smell it everywhere.
I'd eat my foot if it was wrapped in bacon.
Tell me about it, man. We're together on that. If I pulled up in that parking lot, I don't care who I was there to go see, I could smell that bacon cooking. I was in their office. You know, I'd think of a reason to go in there for something. But they had moved downtown. I don't even remember now where I was going with this tale, but they had moved downtown, not far from the old woolen mill, and I mean they were successful. The Cupcake Club, you know, they were with us there for a while. They make the clean cupcakes, which since I've become diabetic, that kind of helped me out a little bit because they didn't use sugar in theirs. They used agave nectar. And
was it sweet still? It
was still sweet. I mean, it tasted like a regular cupcake. The texture was a little different. But I mean, that versus doing without, because that would have been my choice.
Yeah, it worked.
It worked. It sure enough did. That feller, he had the sexiest name ever as far as I'm concerned.
What was it?
His name was Dante Santana. Yeah, he was the guy that had the bakery. I said, now, I could get a date with a name like that, But he come up and then got me at my office one afternoon because I was his taste tester, And he said, I've made a cheesecake and I want you to come down here and taste it. So we make cheese. He was from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. And he said, we make it totally different down there. So I've made an American cheesecake. I want you to see if it's right. I go down there with him. He goes to his freezer and he pulls out this big old cheesecake. And that thing was pretty. It was that thick and had a nice little, I guess you'd call it a frosting. I don't know what you call it, a topping on it. And he cuts a piece of it and it still had a little bit froze in the middle, Yeah. I got a big, because, you can't tell that I've tried a little cheesecake in my day, but I got a big mouthful of that. And it was just so creamy and so sweet and so good. And he looks me in the eye and he says, now, there's no dairy in that. I'm like, excuse me? He made the stuff out of tofu, Dee.
Is that right?
Tofu. He said, there's no sugar in that either. I don't know what in the world he used to sweeten it with, but bless Pat, that was some of the best cheesecake I've ever put in my mouth. And when we would have our little get-togethers, the incubator has its networking opportunities, is what it is. We disguise it as parties, but it's a networking opportunity. We celebrate the incubator's anniversary in July, and then we have a holiday party at the end of the year. Invite all the tenants to come, all the board members come, and they get to meet and greet and talk amongst themselves, because 9 times out of 10, if Dee Burris needs X resource for this, well, it may not be somebody in the incubator, but I guarantee you one of them knows somebody, So it may be a party, but a lot of business goes on at these parties, and we have a chance to kind of celebrate the ones that have expanded or done really well and welcome the new people.
Do you ever have alumni come back?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Shoot, we'll have alumni come back and give classes to the current residents.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you try to not sponsor, but do you set that up?
Yeah, of course.
So they're not just getting a place and a phone and utilities. They're getting a support group?
It's a lot more than that. It sure is. The support group's built in. It's there among the residents right there. Because I can remember one time that Jeff Cox's brother, Steve, has worked for him since the very beginning. And I can remember a time where Jessica Carasquillo, now here again, I'm going back a few years, but I know these guys don't mind me talking about it. But she called me. She was absolutely in panic. She was near tears. She was so panicked because she had done something and she thought she had deleted a bunch of files out of her QuickBooks. I come up there and there's Jessica and her next door neighbor, Holly Swan. They were standing in the corner. Holly had her arms around her because she was about to lose it. There's Steve just clacking away on her computer trying to get those files back. And here, this is the scene I walk in on, right? Yeah. But, really, I wasn't needed, because what needed to happen was already being taken care of. Only the reason she needed me up there is just for a little confidence boost, because I was the one that had tried to teach her how to use QuickBooks. And we wound up after that starting to have some QuickBooks classes in the conference room. And those were sorely needed. It's little things like that. 95% of the businesses that come into that incubator, and I'd go as far as to say I bet any other incubator too, they know their product or their service inside and out. It's the business part that they don't have a clue. They're scared to death of taxes. They're scared to death of computer applications. They know, they don't know how many hoops and what the hoops are that they have to
payroll
through.
Taxes,
payroll tax,
workman's comp,
a business license from the city or county. What is it? Where do you go get it? What's it going to cost me? That kind of stuff.
They have no clue on that stuff.
No, they don't. But the Giz widget that they make, they could take one apart and put it back together blindfolded. So that's where we try to bridge the gap.
What about no retail? Can you see one day as the incubator has a place for retail like a
Well,
like
if
a
I have
plaza
anything to
of
do with
sort
it.
or some sort?
Yes, sir. I'd love to have one downtown somewhere. You know, when we built the Innovation Center on the far side of the campus, there again, Carl Hyatt told us at the time we were looking for a place to put it. He said, you know, we've got that area down there that was the firing range. It's never going to be used for a firing range again. Put her there. And we did. The college actually let us build the building. And the minute it was done, it became a gift in place to the college as a donation. And then they in turn, you know, leased it back to us for $1 a year. Like I say, Cleveland State historically has been a fabulous host to us. As a matter of fact, just this past Thursday, I toured half the business department from the college through the building to get to know the current residents and to talk about ways that we can work together. The George R. Johnson Foundation has been kind enough to give the college some money to put together an entrepreneurship and innovation center that, from what I'm given to understand right now, is going to be housed out of the Small Business Development Center. So that will be an added resource. Cleveland State's very quickly becoming a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs. And I think that that's really going to blossom under Dr. Stone.
They seem to have really expanded their.
They have.
I guess with the nursing thing across the street. But, you know, I used to go that route all the time, but those speed humps just make me want to stop.
Okay.
Golly.
There's a little
They're
road.
big ones.
There's a little road goes behind the college.
Oh,
you
is
can go
it? Yeah.
around all them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean. When I have to go, see, I bookend the campus. I've got one on each end,
Yeah.
so I go on the little road.
And they got
behind
that security guard parked there, so you think you're not supposed to speed, but I figured out he's not the police. So
I was going to say, well, you know, actually, Cleveland State's police department is a police department now.
do they have they haven't stopped me for running across those things yet.
Well, I doubt that they would. I mean,
Do you eat
they've
lunch?
got bigger fish to fry than that, Dee, but really, really quality
Now,
officer Jennifer Bledsoe's over there heading that up now.
are they supposed to widen Atkinson Drive? Have you heard that?
That's what I've heard, but then I've heard that for a decade now. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. What I'm hearing is that they're going to put a roundabout right in front of the admin building of the college where Norman Chapel comes into.
That would be a
Atkinson.
good place.
Yeah, it'd be the logical
Yeah.
place. If they put one there and they're going to widen the road, I know that they're talking about in the much nearer future, putting sidewalks, which would be a great thing because
Yeah.
a lot of people walk up and down that road and they're in the road. Somebody's going to get hit before it's over.
It needs to be just a little bit wider, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Well, especially now with those apartments down on that end, and you know how Paul Huff's booming. I mean, it's going to eventually spill over.
Yeah, the apartments on. Now, the apartments between there and the college are not that great, right? A little rough. They say there's a group of homeless people lives behind that church. Have you heard that?
I've not heard that.
On the
yet.
hill,
I mean,
next
it
to the
wouldn't
interstate.
surprise me, but I haven't heard it.
You see many homeless people walking through the campus? I guess not.
I can't say so, no. But then our little area over there is fenced in, so they wouldn't be able to get into that area anyway. But
Do you ever eat lunch at the high school or the college?
used to see our tenant ran the Cougar Cafe.
Oh,
You probably know her, Dee Johnson.
yeah.
Okay, well, she had Tasteful Gatherings and the Cougar Cafe. And she actually just graduated out. June the 30th was her last
Her
day.
4 years was up. Or?
Her 4 years was up, and she gave up her contract at the college, too. The college is now going to depend on food trucks to provide food for the students and the faculty. So they've got a little area set up back there behind the student center
What if
where
it's
the
raining?
trucks come. I don't know, man. I don't know what their answer is to that, but the prevailing knowledge is that there just wasn't enough traffic there
I guess not.
to keep up the cafe.
Yeah.
And I know that Dee give up her contract there, but she bought her own building And so she's concentrating now more on the catering side and renting equipment like tables, chairs, tents, that kind of stuff. So she, event rental was one of the businesses that she opened with us. She was kind of our lead tenant at the Innovation Center. Loved her to death, a real businesswoman, and somebody that she fought and clawed for everything that she's got. You know, she asked for advice, she took the advice, and she made it work. Tough lady.
Seems like the biggest problem you would have would be petitioning of rooms as it changed. Right?
Those walls might as well have zippers, Dave.
I mean,
we finally learned the lesson at the Innovation Center. That's the new building we built. We went ahead and built headers into the walls and just covered them with sheetrock. When I need to let a business expand and let them spill out of one bay into the next, all it's a matter of is just taking a box cutter and cutting the sheetrock out. The header and the opening is already there. But we learned that lesson because at the main building, we'd had to cut doorways and just
knock out blocks probably, or who knows, right?
never did knock out blocks. Well, fortunately, we had enough sheetrock built into the spaces after our major remodel that we had places that we could do that. Now, some of those walkways are skinny, but when we redid that bay to create more office space, there again, we put adjoining doors between some of those offices to make them like hotel used to have adjoining rooms where you could open the doors up in between. So if somebody needs both spaces, fine, we just put a doorknob in it and they're good to go. If we need it for two separate tenants, we put a double cylinder deadbolt in it, and there again, we're good to go.
And these people are probably generally pretty flexible, right?
Yeah.
More so than because they're,
I mean,
they're innovative type people anyway.
They're innovative type people, but they know that they're somewhere where they're not going to be able to get the kind of support and help. And I mean, the reduced rent to me is the least of it. You know, if you really shop around and you're not real picky about what kind of space you have, you could probably find something maybe in the neighborhood,
Close.
or certainly affordable.
Yeah.
You know, but they know that they're not going to get somebody like me who's going to negotiate that internet contract or negotiate those phone services or whatever other inner office thing that they need, you know? And when I can call somebody and say, I represent 40 small businesses that are everyone going to need your service at some point in time, they're going to remember the people, and I bet you do too, from the people that helped you get started back in the day, you remember those people.
And you know, if you're just starting your own business and you say, well, you're one person, but if you join that group, then you've really you're almost a powerful force in a sense.
Well, it gives you a great deal of buying power
Yeah.
and negotiating power, put it that way.
That's 40 businesses.
40
That may be
businesses.
80 employees or 80 total people.
Actually, our main building employs about 100 people. 100 people come to work there every day. Or they may not come in, but they're employed by the company that does. And then down at the Innovation Center, probably another 20, 25.
So you're saying 125 people, roughly, are employed?
Are making, well, they may not be making a living, but they're certainly part-time employed. Yes, sir.
That's quite significant.
Yes, it is.
You know, if you heard if a company was coming to Cleveland and going to employ 125 employees, they'd roll out the red carpet, wouldn't they?
I tell you what, I consider us a bargain. You know, the city and the county were kind enough to give us $50,000 total when we first did the incubator building. And, I mean, it wasn't long, it was before Don retired, that Tom Rowland and Gary Davis came over to the incubator with a plaque for us creating over 250 jobs in the community. And these days now that number's over 700 jobs that we've created in the community. Now what was it when that they kept Whirlpool from leaving? That saved like 600 jobs
Yeah,
or something?
I was thinking about I had 600 in my mind.
Okay, so, we've created over 700 jobs in this community. Now, granted, it's been over 23 years, but that's still 700 jobs.
Plus the buildings that the businesses have left and gone on to be profitable.
Well, one of the greatest statistics that I have found with our people, just our little incubator, 94%, it's 94 and a decimal point, 94% of the businesses that we graduate out stay right here in Bradley County. Now I can just about count on my hands which ones have left the county. And usually it's because they needed to be closer to a certain vendor. Like we had one that moved to Florence, Alabama, because that's where that they were getting the wire. They built wire harnesses for alarm systems. They needed to be closer to that vendor because the connectors and wiring, that's where they got it. So they wound up in Florence. I had one that was a realtor that wound up moving to California to be close to elderly parents that she needed to take care of. So, like I say, it's few enough and far enough between that I can remember those certain instances where that somebody has taken their business away from Bradley County. And, before COVID kind of kicked everything in the head, but I know the last numbers that we looked at before COVID, 84% of the businesses that we graduated were still in business, Dee. Now, you go to a lot of incubators, they'll use the same metrics as SBA, and 80% of new businesses fail and only 20% make it in that first year. And I think they look at 1 year and at 5 years. And incubation flips those numbers totally around. 80% of incubated businesses make it, whereas 20 fail. But I go back all the way to the very beginning, to those very first tenants that we had before the phones were even installed. 84% of all those businesses, like I say, up till, I think those numbers were accumulated at 2019. I know it's before the pandemic. 84% of those are still in business, and a lot of them still employing people.
And how many would not be that if it weren't for the incubator?
Oh, God,
I mean, with the low costs getting started.
Well, I mean, that first year is horrible. It's horrible for any business.
It'd be hard to quantify how many people stayed in business because of the things, the networks that they.
That would be tough. That would be tough. But I know because of the loyalty that I've seen from these business owners and how many of them will come in quick. I mean, shoot, one of my tenants nearly had me in tears Thursday sitting and talking to me. She said, we took those business professors and the dean of the business department, the chair of the business department, we were all sitting in the conference room. And I had one of the tenants, one of our anchors, come with to bring up the rear in case anybody back there had questions. Because, going down our hallways, you wouldn't be able to yell back and forth between them.
Yeah.
But we wound everything up and we talked over some really good ideas. It was a very positive meeting. And she pops in down at the end of the table and she says, well, now there's something I'd like to say. And I said, well, go ahead. She said, you sit and you brag on us all the time. I want to brag about you a minute. And I mean, she continued along to say some things that were really kind. And like I said, she just about had me in tears saying such sweet things. But that's the feeling with a lot of these tenants. They want to come back. They want to give back to the program. They realize, how big a boon that it's been to getting their business off the ground. And if it's something as easy as coming in and doing a lunch and learn, over lunch and teaching some of the current residents like how to use Google AdWords or something like that, they're more than happy to do it.
What's the lunch and learn?
Well, a lunch and learn is where you'd take your lunch hour, you'd bring your lunch, come to our conference room, and while you're sitting there eating lunch, somebody is teaching you how to do something. How to, how to use QuickBooks or how to use Google AdWords or how to use...
Back in the day, how to email, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and like
or
I said,
saving.
eBay,
yeah.
because back in those times, people were making a lot of money.
erase your spam files.
There you go. I mean, it's all
How
little stuff
often
like
do
that.
they have that?
We do it as often as we possibly can. If I could do it every month, I'd be tickled to
Who
death.
schedules that?
I do. It depends on whether or not that we can get the funds to do it, first of all. And USDA Rural Development has been fantastic. For
And
writing us.
the speaker, I guess. You have to pay them, or
Usually, well, sometimes, but that's usually few and far between. I've normally got a graduate that I can invite back if I know that there's a specific need. And they're happy to do it, you know. They all know the incubator's kind of like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't really check out. You know, once you've been an incubator tenant, there's always something there for you. You can come back to do or to use the facilities that we have there to help you in your business. But there's also a chance, too, that you're going to get a call from Hurley B saying, I need you to come do this.
yeah, it'd be good if somebody was trying to sell something and to use it as an infomercial, or maybe, or something like a
Well, it's
accounting
usually-
service, or
Yeah, it's usually not something that formal. You know, there's always a chance that if you've been an incubator tenant, then the chances are very good that at some point in time I'm going to call you for a favor.
you think the informality of it is good?
Yes, sir, absolutely do. As a matter of fact, I think that's one of the primo things about it. And here again, Don Guerin is the one that he showed that to me very early on. I used to wear a suit and tie. You know, I didn't always wear a jacket, especially after I got there, but I'd wear a suit and tie every day. And Don and his secretary, Mary Kelfie, God love her, she's just one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Me and her became good friends. But they both got hold of me one day. You need to loosen up. Get out of these suits and ties. You're scaring the tenants. And, you know, I couldn't read that at the time because, you know, coming from banking and whatnot, that was just the uniform. That's what you wore, you know. And plus, too, we're going back 23 years. At the time, that's what
That was a
bankers
little more,
wore. Yeah.
They didn't even have Casual Friday then, did
Yeah,
they?
really, we didn't, did
Yeah.
we? But they told me, you need to loosen up, lose the shirt and tie, you know, just, you know, try to be a little more casual. And so I did. This was one of those things that I thought, Don, you're just, you know, but I got to paying attention. And I might not have been in a suit and tie, but I got to the point where I could sit back and look. And when tenants were coming in to meet with Don, and maybe somebody from the state was coming in, or somebody in a suit and tie from the college, you know, and I don't really think that it was just because it was VIPs, because some of these were definitely not VIPs. They were just there dressed for their office, you know, appropriately. But yeah, you could see tenants kind of tense up when somebody in a suit walked in the door. And so I didn't understand it at first, but I kind of grew to understand it as time went on, that sometimes a more casual, more laid-back atmosphere is really better.
If you want residential or commercial plumbing, give Rick's Plumbing a call. Call Jason or Josh. They'll do you a good job. I've used them for years. They're no problem.
I guess that's something else that's changed with the times.
It is.
Remember how they used to dress up to go to on an airplane? Now they
Oh,
wear
shoot.
sweatpants.
I can remember the first time that I was on an airplane, and I was just a kid at the time, but I can remember my mother buying a special outfit for me and her both to wear on the airplane, you know. So, yeah, it was a big deal. But then, too, working at the bank, if I'd ever showed up without a coat and tie on, I'd have been sent home, you know.
Do you remember going to church and having to take your good shoes off?
Oh, yeah. We used to, when I was going to church with my mom.
What were denomination were you?
We
in?
were Methodist.
Methodist.
Yes, I was raised Methodist, and we had the quintessential little country church It was in a town called Dyersville, and that's where that my grandparents on my mother's side lived. And I mean, this was the kind of church that my grandpa, I can remember him in an old flannel shirt and a pair of overalls, coming out of the field, getting in the car on Wednesday night, going out to the church, and that's what he wore to church on Wednesday night. But I can remember we'd always go to their house after we'd go to church.
On Sundays?
On Sundays. On Sunday morning, we'd go to church, and then we'd go out to my grandma and grandpa's house. And the first thing you did is go get out your church clothes.
Yeah.
And I always had some clothes there, so the church clothes and shoes went up. And then we would sit, and you ever played Rook?
Oh, yeah.
Card game? Oh, man, that was a game taken seriously at that house.
On Sunday afternoon?
Sunday afternoon, we'd sit and play board games and stuff, and my Aunt Jeanette would be there, and her and my mother and my grandparents would take our turn of playing dominoes or Rook. And Rook was a game where, by gunnies, that's a partner game.
Yeah.
You're going to partner with somebody, you better do it right.
No
because
cheating.
if you messed it up, you sure got told real quick, So, those old.
How many members did you have at that church?
Oh, gosh, we usually had like 70 to 80 maybe be there. And that was on a good Sunday,
What would you pay today to go back and sit in that church for one service?
Well, fortunately, I can.
Is it still there?
Yeah, the church is still there. My letter's still there. So, I mean, I could very easily go back.
What do you mean letter?
Well, when I joined the church, they keep your letter there. And so
that's where you're a member still?
Yeah, that's where my mother's buried. My mother died of cancer very young. See, my dad died when he was 50 years old. My mom died when she was 56.
God.
So I'm 57, going on 58 in December. So I consider myself on golden time right now. I could go any minute. But
you got a lot of hair.
I don't mind it turning white as long as it hangs on.
No, I wish I had some to turn white.
Well, dude, I tell you, it's been like that since I was 16 years old.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of people's hair that turns gray early, they keep it longer. I wonder why that is.
My mom's was like that. And I think she was maybe 18. She dyed her hair all her life. I mean,
so her hair went gray early?
Oh yeah. I took that from her. She always had a lot of hair too, but she it started going white on her when she was 18, but she started coloring it and did all her life until she died of cancer. And once that she had cancer, and there was so many other things to have to deal with, and of course she had chemo, it fell out. So it come back, though, the prettiest shade of white. I thought she had the prettiest hair, and that's why I colored mine there for a long time when I was a kid, but I finally gave up because it was just too much trouble. So me and Don was sitting there, we look like the same age.
Now, isn't it funny that your wife's brother's name's Harlan and your name's Hurley?
Tell me about it. And the people at the incubator they call me H most of the time because I've been called Harlan and Harlow and Harley and
you spell it with an E-Y, H-U-R-L-E-Y.
H-U-R-L-E-Y. See, on my dad's side, that was my grandmother's maiden name.
Oh,
they were Hurleys.
That's why I've never heard of a Hurley man, because that was your... a lot of people do that now.
A lot do that. And that family, my dad's family, was who I was really the closest with. I take a lot after my grandmother. They were all Irish. They was mean as gouge, but... That's
how they got up to North Carolina, right?
Yeah. So, but that was their last name was Hurley. That's how I wound up with the name.
Boy, that'll mess up genealogy. It gets confusing.
Hey, I'm still looking for, because I get into that. Me and my wife both do. We like to look back and see.
Genealogy.
Genealogy. I mean, we're always on the internet trying to find long lost relatives. Yeah. And sometimes too, we went to, I think it was New York or Pennsylvania, one or the other, where we had tracked down a family member of mine from back in the 1600s and found his grave and gravestone. And my wife, she traced some of her family to a little town in Colorado. and it's close to where that the cliff dwellings are.
Oh yeah, I've always
Yeah.
wanted to go there.
Oh man, it's one of those things that don't disappoint when you see it in person. Go.
Have they ever figured out where those people came from, or were they Indians or what?
Yeah, I know they were Indians, but where in the world did they come from?
And I don't know when they ever left. There's not much history on that, is it?
No, but it seems like they all disappeared at one time. That was
Yeah.
the odd thing
Yeah.
about it, is they were there and then they were gone. So
Boy, it's a neat place, isn't it?
it is. It really is.
You saw it in person?
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's one of those things that, and few things really, that when you see it in person, it doesn't disappoint. You know, it's kind of like Mount Rushmore. You know, you see it in pictures and whatnot, but when you're actually there with it in your face, it does not disappoint.
Some things are not what they seem when you see them.
Some things are not quite
Yeah, you
as
think,
great
I
when
wish
you're
I had
actually
seen
there.
that.
Yeah. So, sometimes the pictures are better, but these things ain't one of them that we're talking about.
Now, back to an incubator being a retail place,
Oh.
all you'd need is like a four places, 4 storefronts with.
Yeah. And they would fill up very quickly. I mean, it probably wouldn't be long before we'd need more space to
Would you
entertain
fill them
more.
up in 6 months?
I'd fill them up in 6 days. I ain't kidding. If everybody in the incubator right now left, I could have it full again by next week. Yeah. That's how big the demand is. Let me tell you, I don't care what happens in the rest of this country, the entrepreneurial spirit right here in Bradley County, you can't beat it with a stick.
You're talking firsthand. You're on the front lines.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't care how bad the economy gets in the rest of the country or what else is going on, you know, what's happening in the world of politics or what have you. Here in Bradley County, people want to be their own boss. They want to work. They want to turn out quality product. That part's not going to go away. I don't care what the other metrics are, you know. And that point's been bared out every year that I've been at the incubator. I figured when I first took this job, because when I first took it, I didn't know what a business incubator was. A lot of people didn't. There was only like, I want to say 700 of them in the country.
You were in your early 30s?
Yeah, well, mid-30s. I think I was 35, actually. But I figured that my biggest job, you know, I was thinking back to my banking days. I figured my biggest job was going to be chasing down past dues that, you know, come in and just screwed it up and wound up owing a bunch of money and back rent and whatnot. No. It wasn't the case then, still is not the case. These people are serious. They want the help. They're going to take the help. And by goodness, they're going to run with it. A fantastic group of people.
You know, when you said earlier that the low cost in rent was very little to do with it, you convinced me, because that hasn't even really entered into the conversation how low the rent. You're an enabler, basically.
Yeah.
Facilitator or enabler, I guess.
I think actually, and there's a lot of incubators that charge a whole lot more than we do. You know, I think even Chattanooga, although Chattanooga tries to run theirs the way that we do, I think even their cost structure is a lot higher than ours.
How do you base the cost structure?
Well, of course, you got to be able to make a living yourself, because we don't get money coming in from any other source, just rent revenue. That's what we live on.
And you need to stay ahead of that, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
well, you do have to stay ahead of it. And so, you know, it all comes down to each year, those tenants, when they come in, it's bargain basement. You know, that year one. For 12 months, they get really cheap. Then each year it goes up a little bit to get them closer to market by that 4th year. But when I say a little bit, I really mean a little bit. It might go from $125 that first year to $132 or $147 the next year. Well, I mean, you know, after 23 years, I didn't bother to have it memorized.
Yeah.
You know, that's how little the difference is. And by the time that they move out, I've had them come back to me and tell me that it wasn't the rent that was the culture shock when they graduated out. It's what they had to pay for the services like phone and internet and power and all that kind of stuff that we were providing
Toilet
for 'em.
supplies, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean janitorial
Toiletries, yeah,
supplies.
janitorial.
Yeah, that was. I've got to say that was a lesson that we learned. We didn't really have a choice in the matter at the main building because there was 2 main bathrooms. Everybody used them. So we had a company in the incubator. She's still with us, called Honeydew Services. Shelley Rupert, fantastic lady. She took care of the incubator's common spaces, the bathrooms, and she'd go in and vacuum the carpet and empty the trash in the office spaces during the week. Now, of course, we didn't ask her to take care of any of the service bays because God knows what that could have entailed. But we had to buy the cleaning supplies. We had to pay her to do it. We had to buy the janitorial supplies for the bathroom and whatnot. When we built the Innovation Center, the original plan, and I got to say, this was Don's plan because that's what he was used to, you know. There was a hallway down the middle. There was 2 bathrooms for everybody down at the end, you know. And it was going to mean that we had to put in a floor. We had to put in a ceiling. We had to finish the walls. There had to be fireproof interior doors coming out of the suites. And then those bathrooms. And it was eating up square footage like crazy. And so after Don retired, I proposed to the board, let's take away the common space. Put a bathroom in each bay. So we wound up with 8 bathrooms. They're all clustered together, and I'm sure you would know, right there in the corner. But then they're paying for their own cleaning. They're paying for their own janitorial supplies.
They're not using 5 paper towels now.
Exactly. And we get the rental income off the space that they're occupying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not only did it save us about $20,000 on the construction, but in the long run, it generated more income that way. So, you know, if we were to build another outfit and another satellite office or something somewhere, that's how we'd do it.
Now see, Good News Magazine, are they still over there?
No, they just graduated out.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's right, I remember
A few months
that.
ago. Now
they bought a building.
They
somewhere.
bought a big building too,
Yeah.
and I think actually he is starting to rent some space that they're not using out of that building.
Seems like maybe I heard that, yeah. I can't think of that guy's name.
Matthew Ruckman.
Yeah, yeah, Matthew. I forgot his name.
Yeah, he did stories and advertising for a lot of our tenants while he was there.
You know, that was that's an odd business because the magazines, you're thinking, that, you know, who does magazines anymore? But
Well, a lot of what he does, I mean, of course, you know, the magazine itself is free. You know, it's not like he's out
he's just
having to
selling
sell
ads
magazines.
as a vehicle.
He's selling the ad space. Yeah. So, but of course, just like anything else, I'm sure that he's going to start to transition online before it's all over with.
He'd have to, probably.
And if I'm not mistaken, isn't Good News a franchise?
You know, I'm not sure.
I believe
I think it is.
it
Maybe,
is. I
maybe
believe
it's
it
a
is.
small fee of some sort.
Yeah, I think it's regional. So I'm sure as a group, they're probably going to start. I know the Coffee News, Evelyn Chadwick does the Coffee News here in town.
Yeah, is that the one-page thing?
Yeah, and I know that that's part of, it's not really a franchise, but it's not completely a local thing either.
I never
they
see
have them
those
in different
anymore.
areas. She still brings them. I know she still brings them to the incubator, so.
I always liked reading that
Yeah,
for some reason.
yeah, I do too. Well, I like anything local. You know, I am a believer in local business. You know, so.
What do you see the future of the incubator?
The
Or
incubator's
is it, or
gonna
is
grow.
it the same?
No, it's not. It's going to grow. It's going to grow. Whether we're at Cleveland State, which, you know, there's always a chance that we might outgrow that space, or, you know, the college could ask us to leave. That's always a possibility.
Maybe Lee College has a place for an incubator.
Well, I know that they've made, you know, certain inferences to that in the past, but I don't know if that's something they want to get into or not. And they're a pretty big outfit over there, but I always felt like that a business incubator was more of a community college thing, because it is about community, you know, and local business. Yeah, I tell my tenants when that they come in that, you know, the Apples and IBMs and Ford and all that, that is only 5% of business in this country. 95% of our commerce is small business. And a lot of that, mom and pop operations. They're not looking to get rich, they're just looking to make a living, you know? So I feel like there's always going to be a need for incubation. There's always going to be a need to have it to be a community project because that's what it's about. It's about the community, you know.
And making it easier to start.
Making
That's a big deal.
You know, even if it's just that much,
Yeah.
giving them a little leg up, you know. Because we've got big business. Shoot. What was the name of it? EHD Technologies was a company that come out. Their office was right next door to mine, and they were on Inc. magazine. You ever look at Inc. magazine? Okay, they do that list of the 500 fastest growing small companies in the country. Well, EHD was, I think, 352 on that list.
Boy, that's something.
Yeah, $20 million.
Yeah.
And that was right next door to me, and an office not as big as this conference room.
If you'd only know.
If you'd only known. I mean, but I've also got the man's cell number. I could also give him a call and say, you know, I need you to do this for me. But, and I have no doubt that he would. You know, that's the kind of loyalty that our graduates have.
Does this parallel anything in history that's similar to this? You know, they say there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, I'm talking about before incubators. What was it? Or was there such... There had to have been something that was similar.
Well, I mean, it's a lot in the way that stuff used to be passed down through the family. You know, a dad would teach his son a trade, you know, or leave a business to a son, or nowadays leave it to a daughter just as quick as they would a son.
Did the YMCA used to do that years ago?
Oh, gosh,
I used to know they used... Remember Barney Fife would stay at the YMCA?
Yeah, I remember that, yeah. Well, I like old Andy. Andy Griffith, I thought, was a good way to manage a town. And,
Well, it was.
you know, if you're a sheriff,
Yeah.
then that's what you're doing is managing a town. So I'd like to see more like him around, wouldn't you?
Boy, I sure would. There's
Yeah.
a lot of them around.
But you could do a lot worse than having Andy Griffith for a mentor.
Boy, you sure
because,
could.
I mean, he kind of had to
And there's a
handle
lot of
on stuff.
people around there's a lot of Andy Griffiths around.
I hope so. And I hope there continues to be, because the one thing that is sorely lacking from a lot of things these days is just a little bit of common sense, you know, and keeping things down to earth rather than it being, people are so litigious these days, you know, and they want to sue over this, that, and the other thing for every little perceived slight that happens. And that just ain't the way to keep things going. But
I feel like
what
maybe,
do I know? You know?
I feel like maybe you're the Andy Griffith type.
Well, I'd like to think of myself as being, but I can tell you, I'm not. I do have a degree. I've got a graduate's degree in gemology. I'm a graduate gemologist, and I've got a business degree, but I'm certainly no expert on nothing. I just
Gemologist?
Yeah. It was something that I did back when Mom and Dad was paying for college.
Yeah.
But it makes for great lounge
Yeah,
conversation sometimes. You know, when you can look at the gal sitting next to you and say, do you know blue diamonds conduct electricity? You know, that gets you in the door kind of quick. But it's been a long time since I've
The
had
gemologist.
to do that.
Do they still
Yeah.
have graduates for that?
Yeah.
Gemologist?
Yeah, sure.
You know, that's sort of a dying thing, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be a market. It's not like it was back in the 80s, you know, during the heyday when, you know, everybody was wanting to have, you know, a big flashy piece of jewelry.
It's a thing that's lost its luster.
There you go. Okay, that's a good way to put it. Think you something, don't you? But yeah, it's not like it was back then. But I was in it for the science of it anyway. You know, that was the part that appealed to me. Once that I got out and working in the industry, I realized it was all about retail.
Did you ever watch Lost in Space?
Oh yeah.
You know, Jim, that's the main character of the daddy. That's what he was, a gemologist.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Now I didn't remember that. I remember old June Lockhart. She was in that.
June Lockhart, yeah.
There's a name you ain't heard in a while, ain't it? But yeah, that was one of my favorite shows back in the day. I'm still kind
What
of
was
an
so
aviation-
good about that? It was just
I don't know.
You didn't
we were
really,
kids, Dee, and
you
it was
didn't have
kind of
to-
out there.
sort of a show you didn't have to pay a lot of attention
Didn't have
to.
to think about it too
Yeah.
much. Yeah, I still like shows.
And they have a character on there that everybody can relate to,
Even if it's the robot.
even if it's the robot.
You got it.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, thank you, man.
was
I've
really
enjoyed
good.
it. It's
I
been fun.
enjoyed that.